Hello there, you beautiful people, and congratulations on finishing that last coding challenge, and welcome to this video on variable scope. Now, scope is a very useful programming concept that allows you to keep certain parts of your program from interfering with others, and it's especially applicable to Python functions. Now, knowing how to use scope can make your life easier, but not understanding it can have you scratching your head, wondering where it all went wrong. So in this lecture, we're going to take a deep dive into the world of variable scope and how it applies to Python functions. By the end of this video, you're going to know what variable scope is and why it matters. So without further ado, let's get into it. So the first concept you need to understand is that there are only really two types of variable scope in Python. The first, there's one big global scope, okay, and there are multiple little local scopes. Now, if a variable is in the global scope, it's called a global variable and can be seen anywhere in your program. Now, on the other hand, if a variable is in local scope, it's called a local variable and can only be seen within the specific local scope that it's in. In Python, functions create local scopes, whereas loops and if statements don't. So let me show you an example. I'm first going to open a new script called scope.py. Okay, so file, save as on the desktop, Python Bible, scope.py, save it, maximize it, and we're good to go. So inside here, right at the top, I'm going to create a variable called a and set it equal to 100. Now I'm going to make two functions called f1 and f2. So define f1. It's not going to take any parameters. Parameters are optional depending on the function. And we're going to print a. Okay, then I'm going to do exactly the same for f2, and we're going to print a. Okay, now when I run both of these, so I'm going to do f1 and f2, this is going to call f1 and then f2, and when I run it, we're going to see that 100 gets printed out twice. Awesome. Now, why does this happen? Well, the reason why this happened is because a has global scope and was therefore visible inside both of these functions, and by that I mean global variables are visible everywhere inside your program, and therefore these functions could see the variable a. Now watch what happens if I move a's definition inside of function 1 using just a cut and paste there. So we now define a inside function 1. When I save and run this, we now get an error, right? We get an error because function 2 can't see the variable a. It says here, look, error in function 2, name a is not defined. And the reason for that is because the variable a was outside of f2's scope, because a is in f1's local scope, and therefore f2 can't see it. So an important thing to know is that functions always create local scopes inside themselves. So f1 has its own local scope, and f2 has its own local scope, and neither function can see what is inside the other function. In the previous example, they could only see a because a was global and therefore visible to everything. So imagine this local scope being like a little bubble for each of the functions, and whatever's inside is protected, and anything global outside can also come inside the bubble. Now, if I recreate f2 like this, okay, I'm going to go inside f2 and I'm going to say a is 50. Okay, now we can see if I save and run this that both functions work, but they give a different answer, even though they both use, if I can open up the thing, they both use a variable called a. And this is because the different local scopes that each function has. Local scopes, as I say, are like little bubbles, and the benefit of using local scopes is, imagine if I had 50 functions in an epic beast of a program, right? I wouldn't need to worry about making up a new variable name every time I wanted to use the functions, in case I overwrite something, right? I might be concerned about overwriting a variable. All I need to do is make sure that the variable scopes don't overlap, which is much easier to deal with. Now check this out, it's pretty crazy. What if I create a at the very top here in the global scope to be 250? okay, and I redefine A in each of the local scopes. Okay, so I say A equals 250, then in F1 I say A is 100, and in F2 I say A is 50. Okay, now I'm going to run function 1, run function 2, and I'm also going to print A. Okay, so whatever A is finally is going to be shown there. Now when I run this, we're going to see that function 1 prints 100 as expected, function 2 prints 50 as expected, but down here A is still 250. So why didn't A change even though I was overwriting it in each of these functions, right? It was first 250, I said make it 100 and print it, make it 50 and print it, but down here it's still 250. Well, this is because when you try to change a global variable from inside a local scope, Python stops that from happening and automatically creates a local variable with the same name. So in F1, we didn't actually change A up here. Python created a local variable called A and set that inside the function because Python thought, I don't want them changing the global variable because that could cause problems. And the same thing happened in F2. We didn't change A up here and we didn't change the A here. Python actually created a local variable called A inside function 2, made that 50 and then printed that. So finally, because the global value of 250 was protected, that is what was printed when we printed A down here. So to recap that main point there, you can't change global variables inside of functions automatically. And by the way, in case you're curious, these local variables are destroyed when the function finishes. Okay, so Python gives the variable some memory space. When the functions run, it just removes that variable from memory. So now you can't change global variables from inside functions automatically, but you can use the global value as long as you don't change it. You can use it but not change it automatically. So for example, let me create a variable called B and set that equal to A plus 10 inside of here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say B is equal to A plus 10. Okay, and I'm going to print B in here. Now I'm going to leave F2 the same and I'm going to keep all this the same. Now what we're going to see when it runs, oh my goodness, it's slow. Okay, so now we're going to see that function 1 actually printed 260. Function 2 just printed its local variable, and the global variable was printed here. So you can see that function 1, it looked inside of itself and it said, I can't see inside of my local scope a variable called A. So it looked outside into the global scope and was like, aha, I see a variable there called A, I'm going to use that. So it had 250 here. And then it did 250 plus 10, and that was 260, saved that in B, and then printed 260 out, which is what we see right here. Okay, now with function 2, we defined A as 50. Python was like, okay, we're not going to let you overwrite the global variable. We're just going to create a local variable, and it printed that. And because the global variable was protected, when we printed it out, it still had its original value of 250, which is what we see there. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to cut this video short here, and we'll continue discussing about variable scope in the next video. But just to hammer home the points that you've learned in this video, there is global and local scopes. Okay, functions create local scopes, and everything inside of a local scope is only visible within its own little bubble. Global variables are visible from everywhere, and they can be accessed from everywhere, but they cannot by default be changed from inside a local scope. If you want to change a global variable, you either have to be in the global scope, or you can use a trick that I'm going to show you in the next video. So I'll see you in the next video to finish up our discussion of variable scope.